Cool. Alrighty, we good to go then?
Good to go.
Sweet. Alrighty, well, hey, welcome everybody. Pretty cool to see all of you here with us from all the different corners of the globe, eh? Been good to have a wee chat beforehand too, so thanks for making the time and putting in the effort to be here. Yeah, we're pretty stoked to be able to do this inaugural webinar. I'm Yo-Yo, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the Northern Hemisphere Ski Manager, and I'm just here to kick things off and manage a couple of things for the guys in the background, really. So you'll see on the screen, we've got a bit of a run of how things are going to work tonight. So, or this morning, depending where you are in the world. So yeah, just a bit of an introduction to what we're going to be talking about. Couple of webinar protocols, which we've already chatted about a couple of them, but just as other people join as well. And we'll meet the presenters, of course, who are Colin and Keith, and then we'll get into the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll have some question and answers as well. So if you, once we get into the presentation, or even now, if you can mute your mic if you haven't already, that way it just keeps things running a bit more smoothly for everybody. So yeah, so maybe could we get a show of hands to begin with, whose first time this is at a webinar? So you can either use the reactions, or you can just simply hold your hand up, whatever works. Got a few people, quite a few people first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, that's great. Hey, so just to help ensure that everyone gets the most out of the session, in case it is, you know, some of your first times using it, just in terms of the features, there is a chat function as well. So you'll see that either down the bottom or maybe up the top of your screen, just depending on your device. So as we go through the presentation, if you've got questions or that at any point, you can fire them in there. And then I'll either, you know, bring them up with the guys, or we can bring them up at the end in the Q&A. So whatever works, really. If you do find too that your internet dies or the screen freezes or something, then again, just follow the link you took to get in here, and you'll be able to come straight back into the meeting. There is also, to give you the most and the best experiences, putting your screen onto speaker view. So again, there should be a little function, you can have a wee play around, find that, and you can just adjust to whatever works. But speaker view will be good, then you can see the presentation and see Colin or Keith talking. And also the reactions, feel free to get amongst it, use those as we go through. So it could be, you know, the audience clapping or thumbs up and that. There we go, anybody chucking those in? So yeah. So let's get into it then, eh? I'd like to start off by introducing Keith Stubbs from Snowboard.
Hello. Kia ora.
And we've got Colin Tanner from Ski.
How are you all? Good evening.
Cool. So with this being the first webinar in the NZSIA and SBINZ series, Ski and Snowboard are going to be presenting it together, and they're going to be exploring some of the key methodologies in shaping a learning environment. So through Colin and Keith, we'll get to learn about some of the similarities and the differences as well between how the key concepts in both disciplines work. So I hand it over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Yo-Yo. Hey, yeah, welcome. Right, we'll get straight into it. Yo-Yo's kind of mentioned it already, but myself and Keith are very privileged that we both represent the different. I represent the ski division and Keith represents the snowboard division. So we work with each other quite a lot. And over the last few years, we've made a real conscious effort to try and work together a lot more. And so we include each other in meetings, and me and Keith are on the phone, I don't know how, very frequently, yeah, on emails and stuff. So, and one of the things when we talked about doing a webinar is we really wanted to present something together as the NZSIA, and with the two big divisions, ski, snowboard. There's also telemark and adaptive as well. But the two big divisions, ski and snowboard, we wanted to do something together, and we talked about it a little. And the thing that what we all do in our jobs day to day, when we're out there on the hill, whether you're on skis or you're on snowboard, is we create these learning environments and we teach people. And so that's the reason that the seminar is called Shaping a Learning Environment. And what me and Keith started to do was to look at what we were doing, and we started to realize that ski did some things one way and snowboard did some things a slightly different way. It was very similar, but there were differences, and we wanted to just celebrate the differences, but also realize that there's quite a lot of similarities. And so tonight what we're going to do is run you through some of the teaching concepts of how we're using and how we're shaping a learning environment, and reflect upon it from ski side and from snowboard side. So that's what we're going to do. So to start off with, I'll hand over to Keith, and he's going to tell you a little bit about safety, fun, and learning. Or is it?
So back when I did my first ever NZSIA course in 2001, 19 years ago, there was this concept called safety, fun, learning. It disappeared out of the snowboard side for a little while. We reshaped it as a whole organization about 7 or 8 years ago now. And we got rid of that word learning. There's a really key reason why we did that. We felt that the word learning was very structured, very, very kind of autocratic, or very, you must learn a lesson. You must take a lesson, you must learn, and that really wasn't what half of the lessons we were teaching or we saw being taught actually came out like. So we made a change. We changed the word learning, and we changed it to achievement. It doesn't take any value away from, or it doesn't change any perspective around the safety and the fun element. But what it did do is it allowed us to present a teaching concept across the whole organization. So all 4 divisions that we can all use as a cornerstone concept, and encourage instructors to be flexible with it. So rather than having, safety is first, fun is second, achievement or learning traditionally is third, it was to create a concept that allowed instructors to kind of make some bubbles bigger and smaller depending on who their audience was. So, just to kind of give a quick overview on that topic, I'm sure many people will be familiar with it already, but let's think about someone who's maybe concerned about injury, someone who's maybe a little bit older. That safety bubble is probably going to be pretty big in a lesson, versus someone who is a little less safety driven and a little more fun and achievement orientated. We obviously change our lessons to suit our audience regularly. So this is kind of the first cornerstone concept for us around how we shape learning environment, using this one here. Hey, historically, the word achievement, or the kind of purpose of achievement, if you like, is quite different, and it's changed a lot over time. If we think about achievement as being something that's recognized, it could be something that's internally driven or externally driven. In snowboarding, back in the day, snowboarding came from surfing, where recognition of achievement was quite hard to do. You're only out in the waves with the people you're there with. So recognition of achievement was so minimal. Really, the achievement was very internally driven. That feeling of catching a wave for the first time. That culture that was created in surfing came into snowboarding. So snowboarding started out as a really internal achievement focused thing, which is quite different these days. It's changed a lot now with social media affecting us. How many times do you like to post a photo of yourself skiing or snowboarding, and it feels good when you get a like, the endorphins go in your brain. So it's interesting how that sense of achievement's changed over time. Colin, do you think there's any change in the ski side in that over time?
Well, yeah, I reckon maybe if you went back historically, you might find that skiing was a little bit more, structured in the beginning, and it was a little bit more achievement focused. And then it was like that recognition, that external recognition of it. And then as we've gone on, I think more and more now, I know for any skiers that are listening, like it's very much that internal pleasure, or the internal achievements is something that's going to be really a motivational factor for us. It's not just, I can do this, but this same thing, we've still got the social media runs for all of us. So that external, can you do the 360? 360, that's old school now, isn't it? 720, yeah, 1080. Can you make a bit more of that happen, and can you get it on video and put it out there? But ultimately, it's probably skiing's gone from less structure to more of a sort of internal achievements coming from within inside.
So it's almost like the two sports have had a bit of an opposite journey in that sense.
Yeah, like I'm hoping come to the middle somewhere.
Well,
Like,
I think it is now.
Yeah. But we were saying when me and Keith were talking about this, we were laughing. No, it's also a cultural thing, I think. So this is very much how we do it in New Zealand, and it works really well, and it fits in with what we do. But we were at I went to a presentation by a Korean skier in the last interski that happened in Bulgaria, and he was talking all about how in Korea it's very much a external recognition type thing still goes on, and they do their level 1, level 2, level 3, and it's almost as if he described it like a golfer. If somebody asks you, are you a good golfer, you can say, oh well, I have a handicap of 5, and everybody else knows how good you are at golf. Or yeah, and in Korea now people go and do their level 1s on ski and snowboard, I believe, but the level 1, so that if you meet somebody at a cocktail party or wherever you do, and they say, oh, are you a good skier, or are you a good snowboarder, they say, oh, I am a good skier, I have my level 1. And it's like their external recognition, it's still really, really strong in their culture. Whereas, yeah, so it's just interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting with our current membership, how especially the Asian membership has that a big part of the culture. Maybe a little less so in New Zealand, but it's still relevant, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Nice.
Cool. So we've got those common things, and one of the things that we do, especially that side, we've got to, I don't know if everyone's aware of our values, but one of the values is that we walk our talk. So it's really important that everything that we talk about tonight, and we're going to highlight it with safety, fun, and achievement, it's not just words on a screen. It's not just us blah, 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 blah. We've got to go out there and walk the talk. We've got to go and do it. So I know for us, if we're out running a course and we're doing a level, it doesn't matter what level it is, those 3 words are always getting run through your head, right? They're always there. The activity we're doing, is it safe? Look around your group. Are they having a good time? Like, are we actually achieving things? Are we setting milestones? Are goals being set and people moving forward? So the motivation to continue and develop further. And so we've got to run that filter through us. It's not just when you're out teaching beginners. We do it ourselves when we're out doing it. And yeah, always it's going to be, it's important that all these concepts we talk about tonight, they're not just words. We're going to walk our talk.
Yeah, on that note, there's a really common thing that I find I struggle with, or I have to be really attentive to when I'm on the mountain, between the ski and the snowboard side of things, and that's how we use the mountain quite differently, and that's okay. You know, it's good to use the mountain differently, but I have to be really conscious of that fact that we see the terrain. We do often see the terrain differently, and especially when you're managing a course, that safety element with, you know, there could be 5 or 6 snowboard groups and 5 or 6 or maybe more ski groups on the mountain at the same time, and building that acknowledgement as to where's our blind spot, where's the skier vision generally, and you know, that's a huge part for us running courses.
Yeah, massive. Cool. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to start to run through some concepts that all aim towards that, how we shape a learning environment. And we're going to look at it from a sort of a ski side, a snowboard side, and compare, celebrate, and enjoy. So the first thing we wanted to sort of talk about was this idea of a teaching cycle or a lesson format. Whenever you've come through the systems, if you're an experienced instructor, you can probably there's a bit of a round and round sort of process to how you structure your lesson. And there's something going on, which is great, and it's always revolving, and that's great. It's probably how we learn, it's how students learn, but it's round and round and round. There's no start, there's no beginning. That's great, unless you're really novice. If you're really novice, how do you prepare for a lesson the night before? Where do you start? Where do you finish? You know, how do you get that going? So maybe we've taken a bit more of a linear approach. So we sort of like, here's the start, here's the finish. But that doesn't get so much of the round and round. So how do we go? So creating this sort of teaching cycle or allowing people to prepare for their lessons is really important. So I'm going to hand over to Keith. And Keith, can you talk us through like how snowboard are approaching this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had, when snowboard or the SBINZ first started, we took the teaching cycle from ski and just applied that. And that was a massive part for us for years, much the same as it was with all the divisions. And about 4 or 5 years ago, when we were planning the new manual, we realized that some people were struggling with the purpose of the teaching cycle. Was it a way to structure the time of your lesson, or was it a circular description of how you present information and engage with your students' learning process? So we decided to kind of change things up a little bit. On the snowboard side, we decided to add a lesson format. We took a very familiar concept, play, drill, adventure, summary. And we just thought, well, that's pretty much what we do on a day-to-day process with lessons in terms of time. You might go out and do a few runs and just play and have a little bit of fun. And during that play process, do a bit of analysis, figure out where your students are at and start to get to know them. And then you're going to teach them some skills. You're going to do a few drills. And then you're going to take those drills and go and explore them around a mountain and put them in different environments and enjoy an adventure phase and wrap up your lesson with a summary. So we decided to take that kids teaching model and make it our lesson format. So how we structure from start to finish every lesson. Then we decided we would need a separate presentation cycle. So we introduced a really simple 3-step kind of cycle that you move through that has various elements within it. We're not going to get into those specifically now, but I do understand that Ski are playing around with a new kind of teaching cycle of some description. Do you want to tell us a bit about that, Colin?
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the Ski, we've got a teaching model. It's an 8-step process. And I suppose if you look at it in the book, whether it's a circle or a line, it kind of can be a line, sometimes perceived as a line start to finish. But if you actually do look, even in the current documentation, the bit in the middle is a circle. It's the round and round bit. But what we're discovering is, especially when we go on to try and apply some of the other teaching skills that we're going to discuss this evening, that's the linear approach is really limited. So we're wanting to encourage the circular part a lot more. And and if anyone's really interested in it, we're going to start talking. There's going to be a seminar or webinar on the 24th of this month. That's 2 weeks, fortnight. And John Gass and Sarah Walls are going to talk about it more. We're nicknamed it for the minute the AAA model, and it's getting a lot more of a circular application to how you approach your lessons. So there's a lot more, okay, you're always going to do an introduction, you're always going to say goodbye at the end of the lesson, but really getting into the meat and potatoes in the middle and really trying to get that sort of circular activity going on where people are going to try stuff, see if it worked, maybe have some feedback, try it again, see if it works, have some more feedback, try it again, oh, it's working, practice a bit more, try it again, and round in the circle, and really trying to encourage that. So keep your ears and eyes out, but we are changing more to a circle, but we're also aware that we need to give guidance to where to start and where to finish. So it's a tricky offset.
It's quite interesting to see both ski and snowboard division trying new things in the space and realizing that standard old school teaching cycle just wasn't really suffice to cut the mustard anymore. So it'd be really cool in a few years' time to see how those pan out and what crosses over and what we're able to create as a core concept for the whole organization.
Yeah.
Speaking
Absolutely.
of which.
Cool. So I've got stuck up here the word teaching styles, if you're looking at the slides. And then, for the want of a better description, I'm sure there's lots of different words you can check out again, like command or reciprocal or guided discovery. It's different ways that you operate as a teacher, and it's not communication directly, it's how you structure your lesson, it's how you're structuring the pace of information. And what we find for us is this is really important. One, so that you can adapt to your learners. Two, so you can really hit that fun part of your lesson, really make sure that it's engaging, it's not just the same thing over and over. And it really allows you some greater teaching skills to manage like bigger groups, so you can flip-flop between different teaching styles and cater for a greater number of people. Now, Keith, you were going to tell us a little bit, how does these teaching styles fit into snowboard?
So we bring this in heavily at level 2. We spend a different kind of example teach afternoon focusing on a different teaching style, so everyone really gets a lot of practice at it. My understanding is it's pretty similar on ski. You guys bring it in at level 2 quite heavily.
Yeah, this little, I guess we ask for it level 2. We do that. Level 1, we'd just like you to be aware of the teaching styles. Level 2, oh, maybe you're in that zone where you're confident enough that you can maybe start to practice it, but it's still pretty clunky. And then by the time you get into level 3, we're really looking for people to be like, to have ownership of these things and be able to switch between teaching styles and respond and recognize which teaching styles and when.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's really good to hear that there's a really cornerstone teaching methodology there that's been very similar through ski and snowboard divisions for a long time.
Yeah, I think so. It's very, and it's much different than just like, you see those comedy programs and they say things like, oh, I want you to read Shakespeare in the style of, and then somebody tries to read out in the style of Monty Python or whatever it is. It's more, the teaching styles here, it's more than just in the style of, you can present your lesson in the style of Basil Fawlty. That's fine. That's not what we're getting at. It's we're getting at the teaching styles. It's the way you're communicating and achieve and allowing the achievements of your students. It's more than just like, Basil Fawlty stuff.
Showing your age there, Colin. Basil Fawlty. Pretty sure only half the audience will know who that is.
Yeah, Fawlty Tower. Everybody knows Fawlty Towers. It's legendary. Yeah, I don't know. I can see Sheena's waving. She knows.
All right. Hey, so when it comes to some of the terminology stuff, there's been a big push towards this phrase experiential learning over the last few years in both ski and snowboard divisions. We have a slightly different way of approaching it at the moment. And I think really we're feeling our way out as to how relevant or how it needs to be packaged well to suit an instructor's, a ski or a snowboard instructor's style or what we do on snow really. So on snowboard side, we introduced the phrase experiential and environmental learning. We're going to do a webinar on this next week with Paul Phillip, which will explore this in quite a lot of detail. But just to kind of wrap up or give you guys a quick summary of that experiential side of things, there's two parts to this we see. The first is the experiences you create with your students in a moment. So you get them to try something and then you reflect on that experience and you build on that experience of it. And then the other side is experiences they have from life outside of snowboarding. So it could be driving a car, it could be a sport they do, it could be their job, it could be their, making lunch for the kids, right? But essentially we see it as those two things. And we don't really have a really clear diagram of how this works, but I believe you guys have started to introduce or use one there, Colin, on the ski side.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to flick that diagram up there, Keith, let's be honest, this isn't us. This is another bloke that's been away and did a whole bunch of research in universities, and this is pretty much universally accepted these days. And the gentleman's name was Kolb, all right, and he came up with this Kolb's experiential learning cycle. And there's a graphic of it. I mean, just Google it. You can get one of these, tell you all about it in 5-minute jobs, or you can get right into it at, like, tertiary education level. But basically, if we believe it, I'm pretty sure it does work, is everything we do, we learn as humans. This is how we learn, and it fits in with the feeling, watching, thinking, doing. It kind of fits in, but really simply is you do something, then you kind of like reflect upon doing it. Then once you've reflected on it, then you think about it. Oh, could I do that a bit different? Then you change it. Then you do it again. Mm. And, I don't know about you guys in my day life. I mean, we work in this, I guess, but going to the last into ski, the word that everybody keeps, oh, so you've done something. Oh, let's reflect upon that and let's go and move on. It's the buzzword. It's everywhere, and it's the first step in this experiential learning is you've done something. So let's reflect upon it, or let's look back on it, or take a moment to just sit and go, how was that? How was that? I'm absolutely sure we'll be doing it after this webinar is finished. We'll be stopping and going, right, how did that go? Because we're doing another one in a couple of weeks' time. What can we change? Oh, and we'll analyze it, and then we'll go a couple of weeks' time, we'll do it again. And so we'll go around this circle. So this circle sounds big posh from Cole, but basically that's how we're looking at experiential learning, and you'll see it everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. When you see it, and like you say, jump into that seminar in a couple of weeks. But we're trying to be very Kiwi about it, and we're simplifying it, and we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. And there is a model here where you can actually just turn it into 3 steps rather than 4 steps. So you just do it, analyze it, adapt it, do it again. So yeah, so we're gonna move it into a simplified 3. But yeah, keep your eye out, because this is a really cool way. And if you can understand that your students are going through this process as well as you going through this process, it's a really, really strong learning tool.
Awesome, love it. So this is a big piece for both divisions at level 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, let's move on to a couple of the level 3 concepts, eh?
Cool.
So on So on the snowboard side, one of our big ones that comes in at level 3, it used to be big at trainers, it still is big at trainers, and we kind of brought it down to level 3 as a concept we'd like to start seeing people start to utilize, and that's that question-based learning approach. So I'll give you a real quick high-level kind of overview of what this is. Essentially, we're trying to use questions to raise awareness in our students, raise awareness as to what they're doing when it's happening. This may take place in a feedback process. It may take place in a presenting a new task time. There's a lot of times in your lesson you may decide to use this. It sounds very similar to guided discovery, right? But the difference here is you become very aware of the type of question you use. And we use, there's 6 different types of questions. I'm not going to go into all 6 of those now, but all 6 have a purpose. And if you're really aware of the type of question you're using and the purpose of that question, it might be as simple as you want to get a very quick response so you can move on, so you just use a closed question. But you're really aware of the type of question you're using and why you're using it, and you get an outcome from it. I have a feeling we'll end up presenting a webinar on this next month, but that's still to be decided. So that's a big one for us on the snowboard side. The other side on the ski, there's a really interesting topic too here.
Well, yeah, so on ski side, we talk a lot all the way through, but we talk about this skill acquisition model. Once again, it's a model that's been brought up by Fitz and Posner, some guys in 1967 or something it was in the US, and did a whole thing. The difference compared with the learning cycle was for anything. Like, you could learn to read a book, learn a language. Language is a bit awkward one. You could learn something up in your mind without doing it. But with the skill acquisition model, it's about doing motor skills. It's about doing movements. All right, so it's very much focused into doing things. So it fits perfectly with skiing. And it's really, really simple. The posh words are cognitive, associative, and autonomous. Are the 3 phases that all of us need to go through when we're learning to do something. If I try and simplify it, it's just the cognitive, that's just thinking about it. You're just thinking about something. Then the associative, that's your practice phase. You know about it, you're trying it, but you're practicing it. And then the autonomous phase, that's when, hey, look, I'm starting to do it, and you can start to put it into your performance without having to think about it. It's part of everything. It's part of what you do. And we use this model a lot. We use it to help build progressions in our lessons, how to structure your lesson. We use it a lot I find it's a really good model to talk to with people, say it like a level 2, and somebody's struggling, and maybe they're going through, if anyone listened to the thing with Tomo the other night, he talked about the learning pit, and people are going into the learning pit. It's just talking like, you have to go there. You have to go to this point where you're thinking about it. And then when you're thinking about it, it all becomes quite clunky, and you lose your flow. You feel like you're going backwards. And then actually, once you stick at it, and then you start to get into more of the practice phase, it starts to come, but it still takes a lot of effort. You're still thinking, you need lots of feedback. But once again, you got to stick at it, because you know you're going to come through it. You're going to come out the other side, and it will start to become part of your performance. So this skill acquisition is, it's something we do a lot at all levels. It's layered in as teachers, and once again, we sort of, if you're aware of it at level 1, that's great. If you can practice it at level 2, that's really cool. But we want you to be using this by the time you get to level 3. We want it to be part of your repertoire.
That's lovely. Awesome. Hey, there's a really interesting part where ski snowboard come together a lot in the coaching pathway. If you were listening to Richie and Tim's interview earlier, they talked a little bit about the indoor seminars that they run. And skill acquisition has plays a big part of that. So it goes into the concepts in quite a lot of depth. What I really like about these two concepts is right now they're used in two separate divisions, and they don't cross over. But we would like to see these start to cross over. And our goal moving forward is to get a lot more alignment in our teaching concepts, methodologies in the manual, and hopefully start to align a few really key cornerstone concepts, but also still have a couple of differences here or there, because when you do a certification in the other division, it's really good to learn a different perspective.
Yeah.
On that note, I think Colin's got a nice wee story to finish up with.
To wrap it up, yeah. Hey, yeah. So just as we were preparing for this, a story came to mind, and it was basically like we've chucked out all these like how to shape a learning environment, and we've chucked out all these concepts and ideas. And a story that came to mind a couple of years ago in my role at Cornet Peak, I was training, and I was tasked with training some of the staff, internal in-house training. And so I had an afternoon booked in. And this afternoon, I had all the die-hard instructors, the guys and girls that had been there for 20 years. They knew their stuff. They were successful ski instructors. They'd had ski instructor careers all around the world. And I was suddenly put in front of them with this idea of, like, let's say the topic was shaping a learning environment. And I suddenly looked at it, and I looked at them all. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to say to these guys? These guys know everything already. And then we started talking. And I started coming at it from the approach of, hey, here's this concept, it's called skill acquisition, or here's this concept, question-based learning, or here's this concept, it's called Kolb's Experiential Learning. And when I first started talking, lots of people, these guys were just scratching their heads and going, what are you talking about? I don't know it. And then, so that was great, because that got me into it, and it got me into my session, and we started talking it through. And then as we were talking it through, quite a few light bulbs started going on, and people, these guys who've been working as instructors all their lives, or for the majority of their careers, and they're going, oh, that thing you're talking about, I do that. And then we're talking about, oh, I do that in my lessons. Oh yeah, I do that. And it turns out all these people, they knew these concepts, but they knew them by trial and error. Like they just, by the law of averages and attrition, they turned out to be the successful ski instructors because they worked out how to do this. Nobody had taught them, nobody showed them, they didn't learn it anywhere. They just kind of, by dumb luck, worked out, and that's how they did it. And they became really successful ski instructors. It took them 20 years to get there, all right? So what we're trying to do is to put these all across, all these ideas is we could set out tomorrow or the next day or when the season starts, and we could try and do it in just plug away and see if by chance you've got these skills, and 20 years later, you might be at the top of the pile. Or what we're trying to do is get these concepts, get them out to people so you guys can use them and go out and practice them and try them. You might not get them right, but we're going to cut that 20 years a lot shorter. And before you know it, you're going to be successful, and you're going to be able to have a career, and you're going to be, one of the top dogs in your ski school or snow sports school. So that's kind of where this all came from. And that's that little story there. That kind of like, that epitomizes it for me.
Nice. That's a great story. Hey, so on that note, we might pass it back to Yo-Yo to facilitate some question and answers, but we'll just quickly mention the webinar next week. So 6 p.m. for snowboard and 8 p.m. for ski. And the topics there, you can see them on screen: tailoring to the individual for snowboard and training structure with versatility for ski. All right, stop sharing my screen and
go.
we're back.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome. I think some really good, interesting concepts for everybody, and some things that'll be familiar to some of you listening, tuning in, and some that might be new, or reminders of something you heard way back when, or whatever. So that's pretty cool. So now if you guys if you've got any questions at all, or comments, thoughts, then now's a good time to unmute your mic and ask away, or you can put up your hand and we can get you out there. So it looks like potentially Sheena, do you have a comment there? Can unmute your mic if you like. There we go.
No, I just think, Colin, that's great, because not all of us have got 20 or 30 years left. So it's good to hear all of that.
Random emails.
Yeah, really good.
Cool.
Good to get reminded.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these concepts, we haven't tried to explain them all tonight. We've just really sort of touched on them. So there's going to be opportunity. There's going to be lots of opportunity. That's our role, right? To be educators, to educate in those areas. So yeah, if anyone's interested, yeah, keep your ears and eyes out. Most of it's in the manuals already.
I think Josh had a question. He had his hands up.
Go for it, Josh.
I wrote mine down, but I'll read it out anyway. Have either Keith or Colin found another time or place in their life where they've used these skills we've discussed today?
Every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can you give us a, for instance, or an example?
So, okay, Josh. So you can use Cobb's model. That Cobb's model. Like we used to joke about, you can use it for buying a beer. All right, because
Explain.
Yeah. So you walk into the bar and you go, what do I want to do? I want to buy a beer. So you try it. You have the beer. You get the beer. You try the beer, and you're like, it's not really the flavor I like. Okay, so you analyzed it and then you adapt it. So the next time you go back to the bar, you try a different one and you say, oh, actually, I'd like to try a different beer because that one doesn't. So it gives you a different beer. You try it, and then by the time you've done that 3 times, you actually get to the point where you got the beer you like. You're a bit squiffy, but yeah, you're a bit squiffy, but you found the beer you like. So yeah, you can apply that model to buying a beer.
Sweet.
I got a good one for you for the achievement and specifically the recognition of achievement. I recently managed to get a puppy in my life, and I've been training it every day. And it's we do kind of 3 or 4 sessions a day for short times, and I use the little clicker thing. So you reward and you click as your reward, right? And he associates that he does good and food with a click, and then you take the food away and you click anyway, and he just slowly associates the recognition of achievement with the click. What's interesting is I tried this snowboarding at some point. I wanted to test it out, and so I had someone ride in front of me who was really struggling with a movement pattern at the start of the turn. And I just said, hey, I'm just going to ride behind you, and when you make the movement, I'm just going to clap once, just like that. And when you don't, I'm not going to do anything. And we did a whole run, so it would have been 100, 150 turns, and maybe clapped 1 in 4 or 5. But by the time we get to the bottom, I was clapping every other turn, or sometimes 2 turns in a row, and it just really showed that you don't actually need to put any judgment on your feedback and recognize achievement, but go, yay, amazing. It can be really simple as very non-judgmental and just a clicker for a dog, or a clap, or some kind of sound that people associate with, yes, I did that how I wanted to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's good for other people to hear how you can relate everyday stuff back to the ski and snow sports industry as well.
Yeah, we're all dog training.
One day.
Good boy.
Cool. Thanks for that, guys.
Thanks, buddy.
And anybody else got a question out there? Looks like, there might be one more in here from Richie. When it comes to the question-based learning, what tendencies do instructors have when asking questions to their guests that are common mistakes?
The question you hear every time, and Richie will be well aware of this, so thank you for the prompt here, Richie. The question you hear every time from people first trying this technique is, how did that feel? And it's a really common question that has very little context. So I'm sure we're all guilty of asking that to our students at the bottom of a run or after they've tried something. How did that feel? And if there's not much context to it, then it's really hard for them to give an answer that you can use and you can build on, which is the kind of purpose of question-based learning, right? Is to be able to get an answer and then ask them another question based on that answer and go a little deeper. So instead of asking, how did that feel? You just need to be a little bit more specific. Hey, how did your ankle feel at the end of the turn? And you're like, oh, I'm not sure. Oh, let's try it again. See what it feels like. So you've got to be a bit more specific. Add a bit more context to your question. Does that answer your question, Richie? How did it feel? I can't even see him.
Yeah. Okay,
oh, thumbs up. There we go.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
Looks like Sheena's heading off, so thanks for joining us, Sheena. Off to celebrate Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheena.
Awesome. Yeah, if you want to hang out and ask questions, then feel free. Obviously, it's time of the evening and on Mother's Day, if you're needing to head off and do some Mother's Day things or call your mum, then do that. I know it's not Mother's Day everywhere, but some parts of the world it is. Cool. Has anybody got any other questions out there? We have another question actually. From Yusuke, is that question-based learning used in all phases of learning stages or just a particular phase of the learning process?
That's a great question. I'd say it would be predominantly used in the autonomous stage of skill acquisition, if that's what you're referring to. But certainly in cognitive as well, as to raising awareness. It's an interesting one. We'd probably have to look at that a bit more detail before I give you an answer to that, Yusuke.
Yeah, because just to follow up on that, we talk about in that skill acquisition, when you're in the practice phase, one of the indications that somebody's in the practice phase is that they are able to identify intrinsic feedback from themselves.
Yeah, right.
So that's there'll be a really good time to start asking questions, because people are they can get something from them. They are getting feedback. So
that associative phase, right? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I like that. That's probably something that we'll explore more when we start to bring those two concepts into each other's divisions and hopefully create a more aligned teaching concepts for both, for the whole organisation.
Yeah. Because that's one thing we haven't said. That's our goal, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, align some manual alignment, some core teaching concepts or methodologies, and alignment within that, so it's a little bit easier to transfer from to a second discipline or from one division to another, which we're seeing a lot more of these days.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is it's definitely one of the big things. Everybody's starting to flip a bit more between the two, and I think that's one of the things that started bringing everything back together. And obviously, being the time that we're all in around the world, it's all about bringing everything back together and togetherness. So pretty fitting to be able to have a webinar on exactly that, really, eh? Yeah, it's cool. Does anybody else have any other questions? So James Taylor's just asked, which is from the chat that Richie had the other night as well. So he asked what the learning pit is.
So the learning pit's used everywhere. I think when we started off talking about the coach's pathway, there was one session I'd laughed, and I'd just been at a teacher parent evening for my then 7-year-old, and funnily enough, there in the classroom, stuck up on the wall, was the teacher's thing talking about the learning pit. And effectively what the learning pit is that, we all get to that point, if we talk about movements, I say, or thinking, where everything starts to flow and it's working and you feel quite good, and then somebody comes in and will say, I want you to change something, but as you're going to ask them to change something, it's going to get clunky. the fluidity is going to stop, and they're going to start to feel that it's really awkward. And whilst they're learning the new things, it actually feels like the overall performance dives down and you end up in the pit. All right. And then that's when you're in the pit and you're trying to get better and you're trying to get better. And I mean, there's lots of schools of thought. I think Tomo mentioned it the other night, is sometimes they try and keep the athletes in the pit for as long as they can until they go crazy, but let them come back out again, because if they can keep them down there, they're learning new things, they're changing what they're doing, but they know that they're going to come back up again on the other side. And when you come out, you've got a new skill or a new talents that you can add to your performance, which will mean it's even better. So Keith, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I really like the learning pit. I think it's something that, as instructors, especially when you move into those higher levels, you need to personally embrace, not just in your teaching, but in your own improvement as well. There's times when you need to be aware that you're actually in the pit, something's not going right, and you're like, I'm getting frustrated. Why am I getting frustrated? I can't get this. I'm in that dark place called the pit, and it's okay to be in the pit. It's okay not to be getting it. And if you realize that and go, and you give it a name, then you can actually go, all right, I'm going to spend a few hours in the pit today. Sometimes a few hours is a few days or a few weeks. And the length of the time in the pit will depend on what you're doing or who you are.
Is this kind of like so if I was to learn a new, I suppose I'm trying to adapt something to muscle memory and I'm not used to it, would it be something like that? So if it's a new movement, I'm trying to adapt to my own skiing, I'm kind of like, oh, it sucks. It doesn't feel right. Would that be, I suppose, in terms of pit?
The key word there is your reaction sucks, because it's how it makes you feel not getting it. And when you're emotionally struggling with that concept, then you're in the pit. And the more time you're dealing with that, from the coaching perspective and the athlete perspective, is they need to put their athletes under pressure in those environments where they're struggling with things and see how they respond and try to look at how best to manage them through that process. So yeah, great example.
Thank you.
And just on that note too, as far as some of those things like the pit and that goes, and Tomo's chat, then those are actually on the social media channels. So if you want to catch up on those, if you missed them, then they were just the other day on them, and actually there was one just today, just the hour before we started on this, if you didn't see that, with Tim Caife as well. So yeah, feel free to go back and have a look at them. So another question here from general user. What are the 6 types of questions that you use for question-based learning?
All right, so you've got open questions, closed questions, leading questions, clarifying questions, scaling questions, and probing questions. You can have a look at what they are in the snowboard manual that's free to download online.
There you go.
Cool. And another question here as well. What are good questions to get feeling feedback on how equipment is set up? I.e. your boot liners and outer shells are tight, secure. They say they're asking because I get yesed a lot from students because they're impatient, basically.
How did that feel?
Yeah.
Sorry, just the question is, what would be good questions?
Yeah, the main question are what are good questions to get feeling feedback on how equipment is set up?
Yeah. Well, I guess like Keith said, is like try not using a closed question. So how does that feel? Are your boots good today? Yes. Okay, move on. What else do we do? Try and be more specific about exactly what's happening. For me, I don't know. I don't think there's, from experience, it would be very much starting up a relationship with the person and getting some questions around, like, what are you trying to achieve with your boots in your boot setup? What are you trying to achieve? And then using those questions to find out if are they working off of a fictitious, my boots are meant to feel like this, but that's not what it fits in with real life, or are they working off some information that's maybe not appropriate to their levels or their equipment? Yeah, that would be starting a relationship and use those questions to delve deeper.
How does it feel compared with your last pair of boots?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I guess that depends on the experience level of the person. Would you say? Or
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you might have a completely different set of questions if it was like you're a starter pack beginner who's just walked out onto the snow and they're like, oh, these boots are really uncomfortable, and you're like, yeah they probably are. Whereas if it's somebody on like a level 2 or level 3 training course, then yeah, you might have to, there's a much greater depth of knowledge in that in the individual.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, there's just somebody asking if they can comment. It should be able to share that out. Rodney, if you want to unmute your mic, or you can chuck it out in the chat to the whole group as well. Can't see where Rodney is. Oh, yeah.
No,
So
Rodney?
anybody else got any other questions? No? Cool. If you can unmute your mic, then Rodney, then you'll be able to pop it in, or like Colin's put in the chat, you can chuck something in the chat there, and that can go out to everybody there as well. So just depending on what you're used to doing, I can actually.
Rodney's mic is unmuted, but we can't hear him, so maybe he's got.
Yeah, mustn't be working. So chuck it in the chat there, Rodney, and then that way everybody can see your comments. The other thing, just while we're waiting on that, is too, if anybody's got any feedback on tonight's session, then yeah, it'd be really good to get that. Things you liked or things that could be done better, because obviously it is the inaugural webinar. So really good to hear what you found worked well and what you think we could improve on as well for future.
Absolutely. And on that same sort of tone, we're like open to, we've got next 3 weeks set up at the moment, but we don't know what's going to happen. So if anyone's got anything, subject matter that they'd like to hear about or anything, then please fire that through as well. That'd be cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, we'd particularly like to hear about the balance of talking versus visuals versus, you know, two people bouncing off each other. If you've got any feedback on that, if you found it too boring or engaging enough, let us know, and you can be completely honest.
Yeah, please do.
Open book.
Hi, Colin. Ash here.
Hey, Ash.
Hey, quick question. This is awesome. So thank you very much, guys, for taking the time to do it. What would be really cool is to maybe do some skier analysis. I know this is really good if we're off snow, to be able to see, you know, and how you go through it is brilliant. How you work through all the stages or the phases of the turn and the movements. That can be quite helpful for when we're in this sort of state. I wonder if you could probably do something like that.
Absolutely, mate. Not a problem. I'm sure. I know we're also talking about on ski as well for that movement analysis. We're working towards building some more online resources. So rather than like a webinar as such, but maybe like an online course that we're going to try and build, sort of idea that you can come on and get run through some analysis sort of skills and give you a chance to practice it. So we're definitely looking down that line, mate. There's a few things in the pipeline. So yeah, I've got a note here, and we'll see if we can get something out on skier analysis. That'd be great.
Yeah, potential for some small group stuff there as well, isn't there? Like, you know, kind of 5 people rather than big audiences like this, so you can get more engagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Hey, we've got the comment here from Rodney, who says that they works with Special Olympic athletes with both skiing and snowboarding. So they like to check their boots before they start skiing and boarding. So yeah, and then there's another question here from Alex Hopkins. So were there experiments done to help establish the science behind the teaching model and other theories that the NZSIA advocate for?
Cool. So as far as I'm aware, the teaching model that we currently use now is what would be called being created organically. It's come up through 20 odd, well, since 1971, so work that out, 50 years next year, I think it is. And it's grown. And if you go back through like the old manuals, some of the guys have them from years back, and you can see how it's evolved gradually, but it's happened by people's experiences on the snow. It hasn't been done, it hasn't been built up through academic research. What we're trying to do now in the age of information and technology is other people are doing the academic research, and we're just using and cherry picking the bits of our academic research that work really well to allow us to try and build a better teaching model.
Cool. Did you have any thoughts on that at all, Keith, from snowboard perspective?
Outside of the teaching model, the other concepts, the majority of them are used in various different psychology or teaching aspects. So we've kind of picked and choose ones that fit our industry, really. So they've all been scientifically explored elsewhere. The teaching model is the different one because it's quite specific to skiing and snowboarding, I think.
Cool. Awesome. Hopefully that helps answer your question there, Alex. Cool, yeah. Well, at this stage we don't have any more questions. If anybody's got questions, then probably last call for questions. So if you want to either, like we said, chuck them in the chat or unmute your mic, then now's a good time to do that.
Yeah.
And
we're also, if anyone suddenly wakes up in the middle of the night going, oh, I've got a question or something like that, then like there's always an
hopefully
option.
not.
Yeah. The option would be you can message the NZSIA or the SBINZ Facebook pages, and we'll all get linked into it, and we'll get back to you, or wait until this video comes out on the social media and then ask the question then, and we'll respond.
Perfect. Yeah, good point.
Great.
Awesome. Hey, well, cool. Well, thanks very much, everybody, for coming along tonight. Really appreciate it. Like I said before, really cool to be able to have the expertise of Colin and Keith as well. Thanks so much for doing that, you guys. Been some really interesting stuff, and yeah, been really good. So, like the guys said as well, there is each Sunday in the next couple of weeks, there is some sessions, one that's more skiing, one that's more snowboard based. They do come out on email, so if you keep checking your emails, there will be links through your emails as to how to access those webinars as well. So again, quickly, 6 o'clock next week, there is Paulie on tailoring to the individual, and then followed at 8 o'clock with Colin and Josh on training structure with versatility. And then the following Sunday, awareness of performance levels with Tony Macri at 6. And then again at 8 with ski with Sem and John Gass on adapting the teaching model. So a lot of those things flow on really well from what you guys were talking about tonight, eh?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, very much.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. And hopefully we'll see you back for those sessions next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.